back to a better world. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today, we're going to have another very interesting show. We have invited a colleague and a dear friend of mine, Chip Comins, who is renowned in the environmental world for making a difference through his conferences, his filmmaking, and the like over the course of literally decades to make the world a better place, and a man after my own heart, in short. A few words on his extensive biography. He is the renewable energy and clean technology expert and serves as chairman and CEO of the American Renewable Energy Institute and is the founder of AREDAY. He is president and CEO of American Spirit Productions and managing director of We Energy. Comins is focused and connects climate solutions in a climate constellation of implementation, acceleration, and replication locally, nationally, and globally. It would take the whole show to go on to list all of his credentials, and we want to focus in right now on what Chip is doing in his current conference, which is literally starting tomorrow. So he's a little under it. Chip, we so appreciate your coming on to at least give our audience a little idea of what it is you're up to. Give us a sense of what's happening at the conference today and tomorrow and this weekend.
Well, thank you, Mitchell, and thanks for having me on your show again. I think it's been years since we did this, but I really appreciate what you do from New York and getting the word out on the solutions to the catastrophic crisis that's facing humanity, which really comes in the form of the atmosphere building up with these poisonous gases. Both of us have the Earth behind us, and you can see from that thin line, that is, in fact, where all life that has ever existed on the planet from the beginning, including the humans, has occurred. And it's not a very big line. It's actually only about 4 or 5 miles, if that. And so we have got a situation now where we are threatening literally species extinction. And that's why we're doing the AREDAY Summit in its 20th year, but its 17th physical actual rendition, because we were knocked out for 3 years by the COVID pandemic, and we only were able to have virtual expression. But now we're back to a physical convening where we're going to have some extraordinary people on the AREDAY stage down here in Boulder, Colorado. We've partnered with E-Town, so AREDAY at E-Town has a nice little ring to it.
Nice.
And we're really focusing this year on connecting the dots between climate, democracy, and human security. So what does that mean?
Yeah, please.
It means that without democracy, we're not going to have the solutions to the climate crisis. We have to have a strong democracy. The dictators and the strong men and the oligarchs, they don't really care too much about fixing the climate. They're very focused on burning the remaining fossil fuels to continue to amass money globally. And so we now are facing a point where we really literally have got to stop the burning. We have to shut it off. How do we do that? How do we do that when 8 billion people, myself and yourself included, are addicted to going to the pump to fill up our car so that we can get from point A to point B to make our lives work? And that's just one piece of the problem.
One piece. Our entire society and economy are predicated on fossil fuel. And it's been this way for, somewhere between 75 and 100 years.
Exactly.
So how do you start to move that major tanker, if you will, in another direction? I'd love to hear it.
And that's what the great energy transformation and transition is all about. But as you know, it's also going to take a transformation of our consciousness itself, how we think. And so that's why we're going through all of these tumultuous changes politically, not only in the United States, but all around the world, simultaneously with the catastrophic accelerated climate events that are happening.
So what do you see, Chip, as the prominent ways of making this shift occur? There are those people who focus on the reducing fossil fuels. There are those others who are looking at other solutions such as regenerative agriculture, native habitat restoration, of looking at the ocean, looking at water cycles. Each one has its own unique gift, if you will, contribution to the sequestration of carbon, cleaning up the atmosphere, etc. In your view, which is vast and greatly experienced, what are you thinking are the best ways and approaches?
Well, I think that, you know, honestly, we've gone past mediation, and now we're into adaptation. And that leads us to regeneration. You know, you said that word a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
A lot of leading thinking now suggests that, along with renewable energy, which is key, let it be known that we will not solve this problem unless we go from oil, coal, and gas to wind and solar and energy efficiency and all the other renewables. And we should talk about hydro and nuclear as we have this conversation. Anything that generates electricity that does not emit CO2 in the process should be discussed. But primarily, the wind and the solar that we know could alleviate the burning of and the input of the greenhouse gases into the troposphere, the atmosphere that is now breaking down the biosphere. And that we should be doing that in a multitude of ways. The regeneration of the soils is first and foremost the farmers of the earth in every country. The small farmers, the family farmers, all the way up to the industrialists have to begin to have an organic regeneration approach to how they manage the lands, because in the doing, we can draw down gigatons of carbon.
Exactly.
And we have to go from 2 points. We have to stop burning it up into the atmosphere, and we have to start pulling it back down from the atmosphere. The IPCC, in its fifth assessment, stated that what would be required would be to actually remove half of the carbon that's up in the atmosphere that we place there in the 100 years, which is approximately 3 trillion tons. Half of that has to come out. And it has to be sequestered in a manner that's not going to leak back out again afterwards. So these are things that we think we can do, but we're not doing yet.
Well, you've put it very well, that on one hand, we have to stop generating the greenhouse gases, and on the other, we have to increase the sequestration in ways that are effective, like soil. I mean, the more I stick my nose into that, the more impressed I am of regenerative agriculture and habitat restoration with species-wide, all the unique indigenous species, when they are replanted. Permaculture, for instance, which is dealing with the desertification, the work of John Liu, for instance. This is phenomenal. They're really changing. Jeff Lawton from Australia. They're really making a major dent in the issue. Ocean scientists I've been talking to a lot. I know you know a lot about all that I'm saying, but I've done some interviews on the subject. And feeding plankton, it sounds so funny, and it's actually so cheap. Feeding plankton, rock powder, and that regenerates that, and that regenerates the fish populations. And that leads to massive, as you said before, gigaton sequestration. Are these some of the things that you're going to be dealing with in the conference?
Yes, in fact, we have a very stunning series of panels that are focused exactly on that regeneration issue. 2 different points of view. One, managing the animals that we raise, the cattle, the bison, and the other being the regeneration through the the agricultural practices of growing our vegetables and how we till the soil at scale. I mean, these are big farms, 7,000 acres, even 100,000 acres.
Sure.
Ted Turner owns 2 million acres of land on 17 ranches in the United States, and he has dedicated himself and his family to managing those lands in a very, very organic, restorative manner. And I was just talking to his daughter Laura last week, and she was telling me a remarkable story about how on one of the Montana ranches they were able to achieve 10.5 inches of soil, regenerative soil growth in 2.5 years. So that's a phenomenal number, and that's through the management of the bison that they have there. So there's people like Alan Williams that are leading this, a farmer from Alabama. There's people like Peter Bick who are making films about this, the Carbon Cowboys. And on the other side of the coin,
actually, yeah,
there's people like Josh and Rebecca Tikel who are focusing on urban and suburban growing of regenerative organic foods. So their new movie Common Ground is now out, and one of their featured subjects is coming to AREDAY, a guy named Rick Clark, who also has some stunning achievements in the regenerative agricultural farming arena.
Excellent. Right. I just spoke with John Rulock, who's part of the Common Ground project.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. John is somebody that I've been speaking to as well, and he introduced me to Rick. So Rick's coming. So we have a really stunning lineup. We're going to start with, I'll just run you through quickly if you want. On Saturday, today is Thursday, we're going to start at 8 o'clock in the morning. We're going to have hydrogen, and the hydrogen conversation will lead into the carbon capture and sequestration, which is being outed as being sort of a false starter for the fossil fuel industry to rationalize continuing to drill and saying, well, we'll just pull it out of the air or out of the stack and back in the ground. But and there's a lot of money in the IRA bill from President Biden for that. But, is it real? Does it work? That's the question.
Like smoking cigarettes, Chip, but taking a lot of vitamin C.
I mean, well, it's even worse than that, because if it actually doesn't work, if they're saying that they can do it, but they can't do it, okay, that's really bad, unethical, dysfunctional. And so anyways, we're approaching a place where tipping point doesn't really even tell the story. It's almost a point of no return, passing the Rubicon, whereby what we've set in motion simply cannot be fixed. Now, I don't want to pull the hope out of this conversation. I am an advocate for implementation, activation, acceleration, replication, and that the human race has become so brilliant that we've gone from horses to iPhones in a mere,
chips.
And I'm showing you the wolf because that's a very important conversation we should have, because we're putting the wolf back into Colorado starting this fall.
Oh,
yeah. I'll say, since I went to the wolf, let's go there, because that's an apex predator. That's very vital.
That's your neighborhood. I'm in New York City. We have wolves on Wall Street.
Well, those kind of wolves are eating up the planet through the unfortunate mechanism called capitalism that we all survive on, but is based on a false premise.
Of capitalism, I will say. Misuse and abuse.
I would put your attention to a book written by Amory and Hunter Lovins with Paul Hawken in 1999 called Natural Capitalism.
Yes.
And it was in a conversation that I had with Amory one day that actually it got me thinking along the lines that ended up founding AREDAY itself. Because I said, what's the book you're writing, Amory? And he said, well, it's about natural capitalism. What's that? Well, that's based on the fact that capitalism is a false premise. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, because it's based on the precept that there are unending resources, that there's fish, trees, water, air. It goes on forever, but it doesn't go on forever. There's a finite amount of all of that. And that it's also based on expanding growth, the growth continues on infinitely. But that also, so we're reaching the edges of the limits to growth. And that's referencing a book that was written in the early 70s.
I remember.
By Donella Meadows. And so we are.
No one listened then.
I mean, we've known this for a long time. We've known that the building up of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is very dangerous to life on the planet. Excellent. That will increase the temperatures. And so it can't be ignored. And it doesn't, and what we're saying, I'm not saying that communism is better. We need to come up with a new system for 8 billion humans.
Come up with one, Chip. We'll talk about that on another show, called sustainable capitalism and compassionate capitalism. It's a whole other conversation. I would like, if you would, to go and turn your attention to something we in New York and the rest of the country don't know so much about, which is wolves, the population, which you started to talk about when you held up your iPhone.
Sure.
Funny as that may sound.
So I'm part of a group that started in 2016 to make an initiative and put it on the ballot that would bring back the gray wolf to the woods of Colorado. We simply have the best state in the union for wolves, and the last one was eradicated in the 40s. And we're bringing them back. It cost $6 million. Ted Turner primed the pump with the first $1 million, and it was a stunning success. We got the 200,000 signatures necessary to get that onto the ballot, and then we were able to vote in 2020 the reintroduction of the wolves. And now it's taken all these years in order for that to actually begin to implement, and that's starting in December. The wolf is an apex predator that brings back the balance. It creates a trophic cascade, which means that the elk stop grazing down too much, the willows and the aspen trees that are taking over, and it weeds out the old and the sick and the infirm. It makes the herds vibrantly healthy, and that has a trophic cascade throughout all of the ecosphere. We've seen this in Yellowstone. It's been documented. So basically, the wolf is essential to the ecosystem, to the health of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's seen as a pest and a threat by all of the ranching community, not all of it, but most. And yet, when they lose a cow to a wolf, they're paid for that. These cows, the cattle die other ways. Besides, it's very, very light. But the big bad wolf, the myth of Little Red Riding Hood, it's in the conscience of humanity for thousands of years, and it's very, very difficult. That's what needs to be eradicated, not the gray wolf.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is fantastic. So you're saying that it's controlling the elk population when you said it weeds out the infirm and the old?
Right. Yes. The weak. It makes it's a natural selection. Those are the ones that are taken. Colorado has one of the biggest elk populations in the world, perhaps the biggest, certainly in the United States, and the wolf absolutely makes it as healthy as possible. So awesome. We are absolutely delighted to be having this animal come back into the woods. We want to hear the howl of the wolf. Finally, once again, in the Elk Mountains, where I live, up in the Aspen Valley. Wow. It's been missing. It's been missing for my entire lifetime.
How are you generating that population?
Well, that's a good question, because you know what? We need to get some wolves, and Idaho doesn't want to give them to us, and neither does Montana. How about that?
Seriously?
Oh, but yes, because they're controlled by folks that don't like the fact that the wolves are coming back, even though they have healthy populations in both states. So we're hoping to get some from some indigenous tribes in the Northwest. How about that? The Native Americans get this point right on the money.
Right, exactly. That's their lifeblood, understanding the ecosystem from the inside.
Exactly.
So That's a very interesting story.
So if you look at our agenda at areday.net, areday.net, and you look at the agenda, you'll see on Monday, October the 9th, which is Indigenous Day. So at AREDAY, we're calling that Women's and Indigenous Day. And we're focusing on the leadership of women and the Indigenous people. And we're having the panel on the wolf, which will be live streamed, by the way. If anybody wants to watch it, you have to go. It's only going to go on one place. It's not going on Facebook and Twitter and everybody else. It's going to go on the areday.net website. And that
will be the whole conference?
Yes.
Excellent.
So you can tune in there if you want to see what's going on. So you might want to mention that to your audience. But the point is that I'm really looking forward to Indigenous Day, formerly known as Colonialist Day or this day, right? But now
it's all opening up with a beautiful Indigenous blessing.
Right. Each day we have a wonderful young woman at Chiricahua Apache that is joining us named Barefoot, and Sheila Barefoot will be doing that. And so we're delighted that we'll have her. And we'll also, speaking of Indigenous leaders, we're also going to be having Shie Bastida, who is the global, recognized youth climate activist.
Yeah.
Will be coming and talking to us about her new movie called The Whale that she's filming, and showing her interaction with whales, particularly the southern gray whales, following their migration up and down the West Coast. And but having that Indigenous perspective of, again, bringing back the balance by interacting with nature and the animals particularly. But her leadership is astounding. We met her in 2018 when Eve Harrison introduced me to Geraldine Patrick, her mom, and then we were able to help her by putting her on the AREDAY stage in 2019, right before she went to New York City to finish organizing that giant march that Greta Thunberg led with Al Gore and Leo DiCaprio and some others. About 400,000 people, about 7 million.
At our drawdown event at Society for Ethical Culture.
Right.
She was the speaker and you were there.
Right, exactly. Well, but since that time, she's gone on to speak at the COP, the UN COPs around the world many times, also at the United Nations. She was just speaking at the United Nations on the International Day of Peace. And on top of that, Joe Biden, Anthony Blinken called her and asked her to participate in the World Leaders Climate Summit virtually in 21, which is astounding because, it was Biden, Putin, Xi Jinping, 20 others, and then Xie spoke. And she spoke for about 6 minutes when they all spoke for about 3. And she put on the demands of the youth on the table. So I was very proud. We were very proud of her that day.
Oh, that is a great story.
Yeah, you can look at that actually, and that's online if you go through all the leaders and then get to the part about where she
should get double the time. This subject should get quadruple the time.
Yeah, she did. And what's different about Xie from Greta is that while Greta is from the Scandinavian area, Sweden in particular, Xie is from Mexico and she's indigenous. She's Otomi Toltec, and that brings in a whole new perspective of the problem and the solution regarding climate change and the breakdown of our biosphere.
And it's giving indigenous peoples a voice on the international stage, which they just have not had. And
they're getting more and more because as we get closer and closer to the edge, we're beginning to realize collectively as a human race that the indigenous people remember the original instructions where we may have forgotten them. And so it's really, really important to recognize that. And that's why I think that so much emphasis is being placed on indigeneity, on the indigenous wisdom. I work very closely with Xie's mom and dad and helping them to bring their work out into the world. And they have an organization called the Council of the Eagle and the Condor, which is bringing leaders from South America and Central America together with North America, that's the eagle part, to remember the original instructions and the four mandate.
advocate of indigenous wisdom through a better world for decades, literally
Yeah.
30
In
plus.
fact, I'm happy to tell your listening audience that when I was in Sedona, where I live part-time now, I kind of needed to do something. So we started the Sedona Institute back up, and we created something, a wonderful one evening summit with JJ and Desiree Hertak from the Academy of Future Science, but also with Mindahi Bastida and his wife Geraldine Patrick, Chie's mom and dad. And we called that Planetary Changes and the Four Earth Mandates. And the Four Earth Mandates came from the Kogi people. And I'll just briefly explain the first through the fourth. And the first mandate is that we must recognize indigenous spiritual authority, number one. Number two is that we must also recognize sacred sites around the planet and pay homage to the entities, to the spiritual beings that reside in places like Mount Shasta and Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Blanco, all over the planet. These are, the big island of Hawaii, and understand the true nature of our existence on the planet Earth. That we're just not really, we become separated from the true nature of our existence, and I think that's why we're fundamentally being faced with these kind of cataclysmic and catastrophic
dilemma.
Exactly. And the third Earth Mandate is very interesting. This is where the Kogi say we must build houses of original thought, very constructed very specifically, and so that the elders can transmit this knowledge to the youngers around the fire. Very important to remember what the fire represents to humanity, because we all know that when we look into a campfire or into the fire in our hearth, that we begin to remember slowly our origins. Where do we come from? There was a time before the earth even existed. There was a time before the sun even existed. And so what does that really mean in the big picture of our mortal existence on this planet? And that's why renewable energy is so important. I want to connect the dots right there, because when we renew our energy, whether it's in the solar and the wind, we're also renewing our spiritual energy, and we're also shifting our consciousness to be able to live on the planet as was originally intended.
Yeah.
And that's what the indigenous people of the world, remember. And the fourth mandate is that we must all work together in collaboration.
Community.
To facilitate the first three. So I'm committed to those goals, those ideals, those ethics, those morals. And I think that the AREDAY expression really does kind of support that in how we go about it. But we try to make ourselves available to bring in the mainstream. We have former Governor Ritter joining us. We have the Secretary of State of Colorado coming. We have the president of Colorado State University. It's really important to bring in the mainstream into this conversation in order to effectuate the kind of changes that are necessary, which only come about by us all working together.
All ears need to hear. You're doing a beautiful job. I was, by the way, in a Kogi spirit house in Vilcabamba, Ecuador, with Susan Davis.
Well, then you know exactly, Mitchell, what I'm talking about.
I was hanging out with Kogi all week, ceremony, meditation, around the fire.
Well, you know that the Kogi people consider us younger brother,
yes,
elder brother. They kept going higher up the mountain, 20,000 footers down there, and keeping an arm's length. But finally, they came out of their sequestration, if you will.
Right.
From
the colonialists, really.
Well, that's true, but to remind us that the mamos that go into the cave for 13 years,
yes,
before they come out, they can see the universe a little differently. I understand that one eye can see the stars in the daytime. I'm not sure about all of it, but I do know that there's more to this to this world and our existence and meets the eye.
Absolutely.
And we're being confronted with that. We are forcing the issue because I'll tell you, when you really think about it, and the drilling and the extraction of the fossil fuels, what is that? Well, science tells us that that's 500 million years of taking, the old plant matter and the phytoplankton and the dinosaurs.
Bones.
But it's also our ancestors. It's what we become, okay? So we're taking the energy of all the previous life that's nicely sequestered into Mother Earth, right behind us, okay? And we're taking it out and extracting from it short-term power, meaning energy to light our homes or to power our vehicles. And it's also power in the forms of money, because we're taking that power and we're dumping what we don't want, the remainder, and that pollution from the process has packed the atmosphere behind us, full of poisonous gases. So basically, we're taking the energy of extinction and we're releasing it into the troposphere, the biosphere. It's feeding back and breaking down the atmosphere is feeding back and breaking down the biosphere, and we're stealing the future for generations to come, not just human beings.
Burning our ancestors' blood, if you really want to get graphic about it, and the energy fields that those ancestors of all of ours have contributed to the earth, the soil, and psychically, if you will, energetically to our lives. So your graphic is poignant in describing what we're doing. And in that light, that should be motivation enough to really want to turn this tanker in another direction.
It's the ancestors that are in the atmosphere that are crashing the biosphere, and we have to acknowledge that.
Yep.
So I'm writing a book called Of Carbon and Spirit, and here's the preamble. Ready?
Yep.
You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, yet it's ever present everywhere. What is it? Carbon, spirit. And what is carbon? And it is what we just said. 500 million years of all of the plants and the animals and the phytoplankton and our ancestors, what we become, that we extract out of Mother Earth, and we burn into the troposphere, the atmosphere, and it feeds back into the biosphere, and we're crashing the ability of life itself to continue on this beautiful water planet called Earth. It should really be called ocean because it's 71% ocean.
72, exactly. It's just crazy. And that's one of the things I've been kind of musing about lately, if not laughing to myself, that so many of our solutions, so-called climate solutions, I prefer, Paul Hawken instructed me actually to use the phrase global warming because that's really what it is. And that we are looking on land, which is all of 28% of the whole sphere, instead of the ocean and water, which is, the other 72. Like, why aren't we focusing on that when we know its sequestration potential and we know that all life comes from water? Hello, right?
It's the water planet.
I am concerned about your time, and you're having so much fun with me and me with you. And I know you have zillions of people tapping you on the shoulder. So I enjoy this conversation, and I feel it's very productive and fruitful. And I want to drive people to your live stream and to your conference. And then you and I are going to pick up this thread another time.
Great. Thank you, Mitchell. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Getting the word out there for the work of the American Renewable Energy Institute on behalf of my board of trustees, all of our volunteers, our team, our staff. We appreciate your interest in spreading the word as we approach.
Love to talk at one of the conferences one of these years.
Sure, you'll be invited to the next one. Just want to mention, we're also screening two exciting films, Deep Rising, which is about the seabed mining. That's on Saturday. Very important to understand that, you know, what we're proposing to do, sending down these gigantic machines to chew up the bottom of the ocean. We really don't want to do that.
God.
Mess. I mean, that's the last frontier. You know, it's pretty much.
Cousteau would freak out, Chip.
Well, Sylvia Earle is freaking out. And but the second film that we're showing is called Lakota versus the United States, which is the new one that Mark Ruffalo executive produced and is going around. So both of them are very contemporary films. Deep Rising was the environmental selection of Sundance earlier this year. This new film on Lakota versus the U.S. This is going back to the Black Hills all the way up to Standing Rock. And that's going to be a stunning expose on indigeneity and how, in a contemporary context, that's expressing. So anyway, there's another, 40 or 50 panels throughout the next 3 days, starting on Saturday. It goes through Monday. Don't miss it.
You do such a great job at these year after year. God bless you. Your work is committed and useful, and thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you so much.
God bless. I told you you'd enjoy that, maybe as much as I did. Chip Comins, AREDAY. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for a Better World. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you can tune in, either in person, it's in Boulder, Colorado, a fantastic place to visit anyway, or by live stream, please do it. The information will be in this video. Thanks again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.